Eddie Halloran found the receipt at 2:47 a.m. while emptying the kitchen trash. 2 drinks, the Anchor Bar, last Tuesday night. Helena had been home with him watching Netflix. He stood in the dim light of their rental kitchen, holding the crumpled paper between his fingers. The timestamp glowed. 11:23 p.m. Helena had kissed him goodnight at 10:30, said she was exhausted from wedding planning. The receipt smelled like perfume. Her perfume. Eddie folded it carefully and slipped it into his wallet, next to his daughter's engagement photo. Sarah's face beamed up at him, her arm wrapped around Owen Fletcher's waist. The happy couple, a perfect son-in-law. The man who apparently bought his wife drinks while Eddie slept. The floorboards creaked upstairs. Helena coming back from the bathroom, probably. Eddie closed the trash can and walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the Martha's Vineyard fog rolled across the beach like a gray blanket. 3 days until Sarah's wedding. 3 days until he figured out what the hell was happening to his family. He touched the receipt through his wallet. Evidence. 27 years fixing other people's broken appliances had taught him that every problem had a source. Find the source. Fix the problem. But first, he needed more evidence. "You're up early," Helena said, padding into the kitchen at 6 a.m. She wore the white silk robe he'd bought her for their anniversary, the one that made her look like she was floating. Eddie poured coffee into 2 mugs. "Couldn't sleep. You?" "Same." She accepted the coffee and kissed his cheek. Her lips felt cold. "I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong with the wedding." "Like what?" "Oh, weather, food, the usual bride's mother worries." She sipped her coffee and stared out the window. "Did you hear anything last night? Around 11?" Eddie's grip tightened on his mug. "No. Why?" "I thought I heard a car door. Probably nothing." She was testing him, seeing if he knew she'd been out. Eddie smiled and shrugged. "Margaret probably couldn't sleep either. You know how she gets." Helena relaxed visibly. "Right. Your mother does pace when she's anxious." They stood in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise paint the ocean orange. Like every morning for the past 27 years. Except now Eddie knew his wife was lying to his face. "I should check on Sarah," Helena said. "Make sure she's not having second thoughts." "About the wedding?" "About Owen." Helena set down her mug. "She seemed nervous last night at dinner. More than usual." Eddie nodded. Sarah had picked at her lobster roll, barely speaking while Owen charmed the rest of the family with stories about his new job at the investment firm. Their daughter had always been sensitive, but lately she seemed fragile as glass. "She's just stressed," Eddie said. "Big day coming up. I hope that's all it is." Helena headed for the stairs, then paused. "Eddie, I love you." "You know that, right?" The words hit him like a punch to the stomach. When was the last time she'd said that unprompted? "I love you too." She smiled and disappeared upstairs. Eddie waited until he heard her footsteps in Sarah's room, then pulled out his phone. He scrolled through their shared cell phone account, looking at Tuesday night's data usage. Helena's phone had been active from 10:45 p.m. to 12:15 a.m. Location services showed movement from their rental house to downtown Vineyard Haven and back. She hadn't just left the house, she'd driven somewhere that required 45 minutes of phone usage. Eddie deleted his search history and pocketed the phone. Upstairs, he could hear Helena's voice mixing with Sarah's laughter. Mother and daughter, sharing wedding secrets. The sound made his chest tight with something that felt like grief. "Eddie, come help me with these boxes," Margaret called from the living room. His mother stood surrounded by cardboard boxes, her silver hair pulled back in the same tight bun she'd worn his entire life. At 65, Margaret Halloran still moved like a woman half her age, all sharp angles and decisive gestures. "What's all this?" Eddie asked, lifting a heavy box marked Sarah, baby photos. "Wedding decorations. I thought we could use some family pictures for the reception." Margaret pulled out a framed photo of Eddie and Helena's wedding day. "Look how young you were." Eddie stared at the picture. Helena in her vintage dress, him in his rented tux, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. 27 years ago, when they were broke and happy and sure they'd figured out forever. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Margaret looked up sharply. "What kind of question?" "The kind that stays between us." She set down the photo and studied his face. Margaret had always been able to read him like a repair manual. Go ahead. If you suspected someone in the family was keeping secrets, what would you do? Depends on the secret. Margaret's voice went flat. Some secrets protect people, others destroy them. What if it was the destroying kind? Margaret walked to the window and gazed out at the beach. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Your father kept secrets, Eddie. Thought he was protecting us. Instead, he nearly lost everything we'd built. Eddie had never heard this story. What kind of secrets? The expensive kind. Margaret turned back to him. Gambling debts, business loans he couldn't repay. By the time I found out, we were 3 months from losing the house. How did you handle it? Margaret's smile was sharp as a blade. I made some calls, had some conversations. Your father learned that secrets are only powerful if you're the only one who knows them. Eddie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying that sometimes the only way to protect your family is to know everyone's business before they know you know it. Margaret picked up another photo, this one of Sarah's high school graduation. Whatever you're worried about, Eddie, handle it carefully. This family has survived worse than whatever Helena thinks she's hiding. The words hit Eddie like a slap. What makes you think this is about Helena? Margaret's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. Because you're your father's son, and she's not the first beautiful woman to get bored with a good man's love. Eddie stared at his mother, processing the implications. Margaret knew. Somehow, she already knew. How long have you suspected? Suspected what? Margaret's voice carried a warning. Mom. She sighed and sank into the nearest chair. 3 weeks ago, Helena called me, asked if I'd consider selling the house early, before the wedding. Said they could use the money for Sarah's future. Eddie's blood went cold. The house had been in the Halloran family for 40 years. Margaret had always planned to leave it to Eddie and Charlie when she died. What did you tell her? I told her the house wasn't for sale. Margaret's eyes hardened. Then I had my friend at the bank run a credit check. Helena's been applying for loans, Eddie. Big ones. Using the house as collateral. The room seemed to tilt. Eddie gripped the back of a chair to steady himself. Without telling me? Without your signature, which means she doesn't have the legal right to do it. Yet, Margaret stood and walked to him. But if something happened to you, or if you signed certain papers, she'd own half of everything. More than half, if she played it right. Eddie thought about Helena's recent interest in updating their wills, her suggestions about life, insurance policies, her casual questions about his mother's financial planning, puzzle pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Eddie, listen to me. Margaret gripped his shoulders. Whatever you're planning to do about this, be smart. Helena isn't just having an affair. She's planning something bigger. How can you be sure? Margaret smiled grimly. Because I taught her everything she knows about real estate. And real estate is just another word for other people's money. Eddie found Owen on the beach at sunset, throwing stones into the surf. His soon-to-be son-in-law wore expensive jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than Eddie made in a day. At 24, Owen Fletcher had the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to fix his own problems. Mind if I join you? Eddie asked. Owen startled, then smiled. Of course, Mr. Halloran. Beautiful evening. Call me Eddie. We're going to be family soon. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the waves roll in. Eddie skipped a stone and counted 5 bounces before it sank. Good arm, Owen said. Lots of practice. Brought Sarah here every summer when she was little. Eddie picked up another stone. She loved collecting shells. Had jars full of them in her bedroom? She still does. Our apartment has shells everywhere. Owen's voice went soft when he talked about Sarah. That much seemed genuine. You love her. More than anything. Owen turned to face Eddie. I know I'm not what you probably pictured for her. Different background, different opportunities. But I swear to you, I'll take care of her. Eddie studied the younger man's face. Owen looked sincere, but then again, Helena had looked sincere that morning when she lied about hearing a car door. Owen, can I ask you something, man to man? Sure. Are you in some kind of trouble? Owen went very still. What kind of trouble? Financial, legal, the kind that might make a person do things they wouldn't normally do. Owen was quiet for so long that Eddie thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke. My family had money once. Lost it all when I was in college. Bad investments, worse luck. I've been trying to build something stable ever since. Is that why you took the job with the investment firm? Partly. Owen threw his stone harder than necessary. Look, Eddie, I'm not proud of my family's mistakes, but I'm not my father. I won't let Sarah suffer for choices she didn't make. Eddie nodded slowly. It sounded rehearsed, like Owen had practiced this conversation in the mirror. What about choices you are making? Owen's head snapped toward Eddie. What do you mean? I mean that sometimes good people make bad decisions when they're desperate, and sometimes those decisions hurt the people they love most. Owen stared at Eddie for a long moment, his face cycling through confusion, understanding, and something that might have been fear. Mr. Halloran, Eddie, if you know something, just say it. Eddie smiled and clapped Owen on the shoulder. I'm just saying that families protect each other, no matter what. You understand? Yes. Yes, I understand. Good. Eddie started walking back toward the house. Dinner's in an hour. Helena's making her famous lasagna. Eddie didn't look back, but he could feel Owen watching him until he disappeared over the dunes. At dinner, Eddie observed his family like a scientist studying specimens. Helena laughed too loud at Charlie's jokes. Sarah pushed food around her plate without eating. Owen kept checking his phone. Margaret watched everyone with the sharp attention of a hawk circling prey. So, Owen, Charlie said, refilling his wine glass for the third time. Tell us about this new job. Investment firm, right? Must be nice working with other people's money. Eddie caught the edge in his brother's voice. Charlie had always resented successful people, especially the ones younger than him. It's challenging work, Owen replied carefully. Lots of responsibility. I bet. What kind of investments do you handle? Charlie, Helena interrupted. Let the boy eat his dinner. It's okay, Owen said. Mostly portfolio management for private clients. Some real estate development funding? Eddie's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Real estate development? Small projects mostly. Residential properties, some commercial renovation. Here on the island? Owen hesitated. Some local properties, yes. Eddie glanced at Helena, who was studying her plate with sudden intense interest. That's interesting. Helena's in real estate too. Maybe you two could collaborate. Oh, we've discussed it, Helena said quickly. But Owen works with much bigger projects than I do. How big? Margaret asked. Owen set down his fork. Mrs. Halloran? Is this an interrogation? Margaret smiled sweetly. Just curious about my granddaughter's future security. Sarah finally spoke up. Can we please not talk about money at dinner? It makes me nervous. Why would money make you nervous, sweetheart? Eddie asked. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Because everyone always seems angry when they talk about it. Like it's more important than people. The table went silent. Sarah excused herself and ran upstairs, leaving the adults to stare at each other across the half-eaten lasagna. Nice job, everyone, Charlie muttered. Owen stood to follow Sarah, but Helena caught his wrist. Let me, she said. Mother to daughter. Eddie watched Helena hurry after their daughter, then turned to Owen. She's been emotional lately. The pregnancy, probably? Owen's face went white. The what? Eddie felt something cold settle in his stomach. Sarah's pregnancy. She told us yesterday. Owen looked around the table desperately. I need some air. He stumbled outside, leaving Eddie staring at the empty chair. Charlie whistled low. Well, that was illuminating, Margaret said calmly. Eddie found Owen vomiting in the bushes behind the house. The younger man looked up, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Food poisoning? Eddie asked. Owen laughed bitterly. Something like that. Eddie handed him a bottle of water from the outdoor fridge. Want to talk about it? Not really. Sarah's my daughter, Owen. If there's something I should know. Owen drank half the bottle in one gulp, then leaned against the house. The timeline doesn't work, Eddie. What timeline? Sarah says she's 8 weeks pregnant, but we haven't been together like that in over 2 months. Eddie felt the world shift beneath his feet. What are you saying? I'm saying either Sarah's lying about when she got pregnant or... Owen couldn't finish the sentence. Or the baby isn't yours. Owen nodded miserably. She's been distant lately. Secretive. I thought it was wedding stress, but now... Eddie's mind raced through possibilities, all of them ugly. Have you asked her about it? How do you ask the woman you love if she's cheating on you? Eddie almost laughed at the irony. Very carefully. Owen studied Eddie's face. You know something? About Sarah? About what's going on with this family? Eddie was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Owen might be part of the problem, but he was also clearly as confused as Eddie was. Owen, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Are you having an affair with my wife? Owen's reaction was immediate and visceral. Jesus Christ, no. Eddie, what the hell? Because if you are, and if Sarah found out, that might explain why she's claiming to be pregnant with your baby when she's actually pregnant with someone else's. Owen stared at Eddie like he'd grown a second head. This is insane. Helena's your wife. Sarah's my fiancée. We're all family. Family members have affairs all the time, Owen. It's not exactly uncommon. Owen was quiet for a long moment, processing. You think Helena's cheating on you? I think someone's lying about something, and I'm tired of being the only person in this family who doesn't know what's going on. Owen ran his hands through his hair. Eddie, I swear to you, I have never touched your wife. Never even thought about it. Eddie believed him. Owen's confusion seemed genuine, his disgust at the suggestion real. Then who? Eddie asked. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. At midnight, Eddie lay in bed listening to Helena breathe beside him. She'd been asleep for an hour, her phone charging on the nightstand within arm's reach. Eddie waited another 10 minutes, then carefully lifted the phone and crept to the bathroom. Helena used Sarah's birthday as her passcode. He'd seen her enter it dozens of times. The phone unlocked on the first try. Eddie scrolled through recent texts, looking for anything unusual. Most were wedding-related. Florists, caterers, the usual chaos of planning a big event. But then he found a thread that made his blood freeze. Eddie stood in the bathroom staring at his wife's phone. He was reading a text exchange with a contact saved only as the letter B. The messages went back for weeks. A message from B read, "Hotel room is booked for Tuesday." "Same place," Helena had replied. "Can't do Tuesday. Eddie will notice." B wrote back, "Then when? We need to discuss the terms." Helena texted, "After the wedding." Once everything's settled, the reply from B was impatient. "Helena, I'm not going to wait forever. Either you're serious about this or you're not." "I'm serious," Helena wrote. "Just give me time." B questioned her. "Time for what? To change your mind? To decide you'd rather stay married to your boring husband?" Helena's response was pleading. "Don't be cruel. You know this isn't easy for me." B's final message in that exchange was a cold reminder. "Nothing worthwhile is easy. That's what you told me when we started this." Eddie's hands shook as he scrolled further back in the conversation. It became sickeningly clear. Helena was leaving him, not just for an affair, but permanently. And whoever this B was had been helping her plan it for months. But it was the next set of messages, the ones about money, that made Eddie's vision blur with pure rage. B had written, "Margaret's house should appraise for at least $800K. With your half of the divorce settlement and the life insurance policy, you're looking at over $1 million. Helena had replied, "If Eddie signs the papers, he's not stupid." B texted back, "He doesn't have to be stupid. He just has to be trusting." Helena had then asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" And then came the message from B that made the air leave Eddie's lungs. It read, "It means accidents happen, Helena, especially to men who work with dangerous electrical equipment all day." Eddie dropped the phone. He heard it clatter against the bathroom tile. He looked down and saw the screen had cracked, but the conversation was still glowing on the display. Helena wasn't just planning to divorce him. She was planning to eliminate him. And she wasn't planning to do it alone. "Eddie, what was that noise?" Helena's voice came from the bedroom, thick with sleep. Eddie quickly picked up the phone and deleted his search history, his mind racing. "Just dropped my water glass. Go back to sleep." "Are you okay?" "Fine, just clumsy." He set the phone back on its charger and slipped into bed beside his wife. Helena rolled over and draped her arm across his chest, the same way she had for 27 years. "Love you," she murmured against his shoulder. Eddie stared at the ceiling and tried to keep his breathing steady. "Love you too." But now he knew what love meant to Helena. It meant life insurance policies and appraisal values and electrical accidents. It meant planning his death while lying in his arms. Eddie had always been good at fixing things. Tomorrow, he'd start fixing this. The next morning, Eddie woke before dawn and drove to the island's only 24-hour diner. He needed to think, and he couldn't do it with Helena watching his every move. The diner was nearly empty except for a few fishermen grabbing coffee before heading out to sea. Eddie ordered black coffee and sat in a corner booth, trying to process what he'd learned. Helena was having an affair with someone identified only as B. They were planning his death to collect insurance money and inherit Margaret's house. Sarah was pregnant, but Owen didn't think the baby was his. Margaret knew about Helena's financial scheming, but not the extent of it, and Eddie had less than 48 hours to figure out how to protect his family without destroying it completely. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. We need to talk. Meet me at the lighthouse at 8 a.m. Come alone. Eddie stared at the message. Only one person would have his number but not be in his contacts. Only one person would want to meet secretly. B. The Vineyard Lighthouse stood on a rocky outcrop 20 minutes from town, surrounded by scrubby beach grass and weathered warning signs about dangerous currents. Eddie arrived 10 minutes early and waited in his truck, watching the access road. At exactly 8 a.m., a black BMW pulled into the parking area. Eddie's stomach dropped as he recognized the driver, Dr. Felix Moran, the family doctor who delivered Sarah 22 years ago. The man Eddie had helped during a blizzard 5 years earlier when Moran's daughter was stranded on the mainland. The man who owed Eddie a favor. Moran approached Eddie's truck, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something that looked like guilt mixed with fear. Eddie. Felix. They stood facing each other in the morning wind, two men who'd known each other for decades, suddenly strangers. I suppose you have questions, Moran said. I have Helena's phone. Moran closed his eyes. How much did you see? Enough. Moran walked to the edge of the cliff and stared out at the ocean. Eddie followed, keeping distance between them. How long? Eddie asked. 6 months. Maybe 7. Why? Moran laughed bitterly. Have you looked at your wife lately, Eddie? Really looked at her? She's 42 years old and still turns heads when she walks into a room. That's not an answer. My marriage has been dead for years. Margaret and I sleep in separate bedrooms, eat separate meals, live separate lives. Helena was... Moran paused. She was paying attention to me, asking about my work, my interests, making me feel like I mattered. Eddie felt sick. So you decided to help her eliminate me? Moran spun around. What? No, Eddie, you've got it wrong. I saw the messages, Felix. Electrical accidents, life insurance. You were planning my death. Jesus, no. Moran ran his hands through his gray hair. Helena suggested it once when she was angry. I told her she was crazy, that I'd never hurt you. That's when she said maybe she didn't need my help with that part. Eddie's blood chilled. What did she mean? I don't know. I thought she was just venting frustration. Moran's face went pale. Eddie, you don't think she'd actually... I think my wife is capable of things I never imagined. Eddie pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Wait. Moran grabbed Eddie's wrist. There's something else you need to know. What? Sarah's pregnancy. I ran the tests last week. Eddie's finger hovered over the call button. And the baby isn't Owen's. The conception date is wrong by at least 6 weeks. Whose is it? Moran was quiet for so long that Eddie thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the wind. I think it might be mine. Eddie drove back to the rental house in a daze, Moran's confession echoing in his head. Sarah was pregnant with Dr. Moran's baby. Helena was planning Eddie's death. Owen was an unwitting pawn in a game he didn't understand. And tomorrow was the wedding. Eddie parked in the driveway and sat in his truck trying to formulate a plan. He could call the police, but what would he tell them? That his wife was having an affair and had made vague threats? That his daughter was pregnant by their family doctor? That his son-in-law-to-be was somehow involved in financial fraud? He had suspicions and partial evidence, but nothing concrete enough to stop a wedding or destroy 3 people's lives. Unless he could find more evidence. Eddie walked into the house and found Margaret in the kitchen, making coffee with the focused intensity she brought to all domestic tasks. You're up early, she said without turning around. Couldn't sleep. You? Same. Margaret filled 2 mugs and handed one to Eddie. We need to talk. Eddie followed his mother to the living room where she'd arranged the wedding photos in neat stacks on the coffee table. Margaret sat in her usual chair and gestured for Eddie to take the couch. I know about Felix, she said without preamble. Eddie nearly dropped his coffee. What do you know? I know he's been seeing Helena. I know about their little financial schemes. And I know you've been investigating. Eddie stared at his mother. How long have you known? Longer than you have. Margaret's voice was crisp and businesslike. I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago. You what? Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. Photographs, bank records, hotel receipts, phone logs. Everything you need to know about what your wife has been doing behind your back. Eddie opened the folder with trembling hands. The first photograph showed Helena and Dr. Moran entering a hotel room. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. The second photograph made Eddie's stomach lurch. Helena and Moran weren't alone. A third person stood with them in the hotel corridor, face partially obscured by shadow, but unmistakably familiar. Owen. I don't understand, Eddie said. Owen's been helping them, Margaret explained. His investment firm has been moving money around, setting up accounts, preparing for Helena's new life after your death. Eddie flipped through more photos. Owen and Helena at a restaurant. Owen and Moran shaking hands outside a bank, the three of them together in what looked like detailed planning sessions. But Owen seemed genuinely surprised about Sarah's pregnancy, and when I asked him about the affair, he was surprised because Sarah's pregnancy wasn't part of their plan, Margaret said. Felix got careless. Now they have a complication that could expose everything. Eddie's mind raced through the implications. So Sarah doesn't know? Sarah doesn't know anything. She thinks she's marrying a man who loves her. She thinks her mother is planning the perfect wedding. She thinks her pregnancy is a blessing. We have to tell her. Do we? Margaret's voice was sharp. Tell her what exactly? That her fiancé is helping her mother plan her father's elimination? That she's pregnant by the family doctor? That her entire world is built on lies? Eddie slumped back against the couch cushions. What's the alternative? Margaret smiled, and Eddie recognized the expression from his childhood. It was the look she got when she decided to take control of a situation. We let them think they're winning, she said. Right up until the moment we destroy them all. The wedding rehearsal took place at sunset on Friday evening. The small stone church overlooked the harbor, its bell tower silhouetted against the orange sky. Sarah wore a simple white dress and looked radiant despite the dark circles under her eyes. Eddie walked his daughter down the aisle, acutely aware that this might be the last time she looked at him with uncomplicated love. At the altar, Owen waited with the nervous smile of a man about to promise his life to someone while secretly planning her father's death. Dearly beloved, the minister began, we are gathered here to rehearse the sacred union of Sarah and Owen. Eddie only half listened to the words. Instead, he watched the faces around him. Helena beamed with maternal pride, playing her role perfectly. Dr. Moran sat in the third row, his medical bag beside him like he was expecting an emergency. Margaret observed everything with the sharp attention of a chess master planning her next move. Charlie stood beside Eddie as best man, fidgeting with his tie and trying not to look drunk. Bridge Collins, Sarah's maid of honor, kept glancing between Owen and Helena with an expression Eddie couldn't read. Eddie, the minister said, this is where you give Sarah away. Eddie looked down at his daughter's upturned face. She smiled at him with complete trust, the same way she had when she was 5 years old and believed her father could fix anything. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? The minister asked. Eddie's voice caught in his throat. Her mother and I do. Sarah squeezed his hand and whispered, I love you, Daddy. Eddie kissed her forehead and placed her hand in Owen's. The younger man's palm was sweaty, his grip uncertain. Take care of her, Eddie said quietly. Owen met his eyes. I will. I promise. Eddie stepped back and rejoined the congregation, wondering if Owen actually believed his own lies or if he was simply a better actor than Eddie had given him credit for. After the rehearsal, the wedding party gathered at a nearby restaurant for dinner. Eddie found himself seated between Charlie and Bridge, directly across from Helena and Dr. Moran. The seating arrangement put him in perfect position to observe their interactions. Helena and Moran were careful not to look at each other directly, but Eddie caught the subtle signals. A slight nod when Helena mentioned tomorrow's timeline. A brief smile when Moran suggested he'd arrive early to check on Sarah. Small confirmations that they were still following their plan. Eddie, Bridge said, leaning closer, can I ask you something? Sure. Bridge glanced around the table, then lowered her voice. Have you noticed anything strange about Owen lately? Eddie's attention sharpened. Strange how? Phone calls at weird hours, meetings that he won't talk about, money appearing in his account that he can't explain. Eddie kept his expression neutral. Money? Sarah mentioned it last week. Owen paid off his student loans suddenly, bought her an expensive engagement ring, started talking about buying a house. She was happy about it, but Bridge shrugged. Where does a guy with no family money suddenly get that kind of cash? Eddie glanced at Owen, who was deep in conversation with Margaret about his job prospects. Did Sarah seem worried about it? Not worried exactly, more like confused. Owen told her he'd gotten a bonus at work, but Sarah said his company doesn't give bonuses to new employees. Eddie filed this information away. Owen was definitely getting money from somewhere, and it wasn't his legitimate job. Bridge, can I ask you to do something for me? What? Keep an eye on Sarah tomorrow. If anything seems wrong, anything at all, call me immediately. Bridge frowned. Eddie, what's going on? I hope nothing, but if something is going on, Sarah's going to need friends she can trust. Bridge nodded slowly. You're scaring me a little. Good. Stay scared. It'll keep you alert. At 11 p.m., Eddie excused himself from the dinner and walked to his truck. Margaret followed him into the parking lot. Ready for tomorrow? She asked. Define ready. Margaret handed him a small digital recorder. Everything they say will be captured. The police will have what they need. Eddie pocketed the device. What if they don't say anything incriminating? They will. People like Helena can't resist gloating when they think they've won. Eddie looked back at the restaurant where his family was toasting Sarah's future happiness with wine and laughter. Mom, what if we're wrong? What if Helena's just having an affair and we're turning it into something bigger? Margaret's expression didn't change. Then we'll have embarrassed your wife and ended your marriage over an infidelity instead of preventing your elimination. I think I can live with that trade-off. Eddie nodded. What about Sarah? Sarah will survive. She's stronger than you think. And Owen? Margaret's smile was cold. Owen made his choice when he decided to help eliminate my son for money. Whatever happens to him, he's earned. Eddie drove home alone, leaving Helena to ride with other family members. He needed time to think, to prepare for tomorrow's confrontation. But when he arrived at the rental house, he found Detective Will Travers sitting on the front porch. Will Travers had been Eddie's friend since high school, back when they'd both been more interested in motorcycles than responsibility. Now Will wore the badge of the Martha's Vineyard Police Department and the tired expression of a man who'd seen too much small-town drama. Eddie. Will stood and extended his hand. We need to talk. About what? About the fact that someone filed a complaint against you today. Harassment, stalking, making threats. Eddie's stomach dropped. Who filed the complaint? Your wife? Eddie sat down heavily on the porch steps. Helena had anticipated his investigation and moved to discredit him before he could expose her. Will, you've known me for 30 years. Do I seem like the type to harass my own wife? Will sat down beside Eddie. No, you don't. Which is why I'm here instead of sending a patrol car. Helena claims you've been following her, going through her personal belongings, making accusations about an affair. She's right about the accusations. Will raised an eyebrow. You think Helena's cheating? I know she's cheating, with Dr. Moran. Felix Moran? The guy who delivered your daughter? Eddie pulled out his phone and showed Will one of Margaret's photographs. Will studied the image of Helena and Moran entering the hotel room. Well, crap, Will said quietly. It gets worse. Eddie explained about the text messages, the financial schemes, the life insurance policies. Will listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. Eddie, these are serious accusations. If you're right about the elimination plot, I'm right. Then we need to handle this carefully. Helena's complaint gives her legal cover. If we move too fast, she can claim you're harassing her out of jealousy. Eddie felt trapped. So what do? We wait for tomorrow. If Helena and Moran are planning something, they'll have to act during the wedding or soon after. That's when we'll have them. Will stood to leave, then paused. Eddie, I have to ask, are you sure about all this? Because if you're wrong, you're about to destroy your family over suspicions and photographs. Eddie met his friend's eyes. Will, I've been married to Helena for 27 years. I know when she's lying to me. And she's been lying about everything. Will nodded slowly. Okay, I'll have units nearby tomorrow just in case, but Eddie, promise me something. What? Don't do anything stupid. Let us handle the legal stuff. You focus on protecting Sarah. After Will left, Eddie sat alone on the porch, listening to the ocean and trying to prepare himself for what tomorrow would bring. The wedding was in 18 hours. In 18 hours, he'd either save his family or watch it explode into pieces. At midnight, Helena's car pulled into the driveway. Eddie watched through the window as she sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, talking on her phone. Even from a distance, her body language looked tense, agitated. When she finally came inside, her smile was bright and artificial. How was girls' night? Eddie asked. Wonderful. Sarah's so excited for tomorrow. Helena kissed Eddie's cheek, and he caught a whiff of men's cologne that wasn't his. I'm exhausted. Going straight to bed. Eddie waited until he heard the bedroom door close, then activated the recording device Margaret had given him. Tomorrow, every word would be evidence. Wedding day. Eddie woke at dawn to find Helena already gone. Her side of the bed was cold, and her wedding outfit was missing from the closet. A note on her pillow read, "Gone early to help Sarah get ready. See you at the church. Love you." Eddie showered and dressed in his only good suit, the same one he'd worn to his father's funeral 10 years earlier. In the mirror, he looked like a man preparing for another funeral. His phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Everything's in place. Remember, let them talk." Another text from Will. "Units are positioned. Stay calm." A third text from an unknown number. "Change of plans. Meet me at the church basement at 10 a.m. Come alone." B. Eddie stared at the last message. Dr. Moran wanted to meet before the ceremony. Either he was getting cold feet or something had gone wrong with their plan. Eddie drove to the church 20 minutes early. The parking lot was already half full of wedding guests, but he found a side entrance that led to the basement. The space was used for Sunday school classes and community meetings, filled with folding chairs and children's artwork on the walls. Dr. Moran was waiting for him, pacing between the chairs like a caged animal. "Felix." "Eddie, thank God. We need to talk." Eddie activated the hidden recorder. "I'm listening." "This has gone too far. Helena's lost her mind. She's talking about—" Moran couldn't finish the sentence. "About eliminating me?" Moran's face went white. "How did you know?" "I know everything, Felix. The affair, the money, the insurance policies. I know about Sarah's baby. I know about Owen's involvement." Moran sank into a folding chair. "Then you know I never wanted any of this to happen. But you went along with it." "At first, it was just an affair. Helena was unhappy. I was lonely. We found comfort in each other." Moran's voice cracked. "Then Helena started talking about leaving you, about needing money for a new life. I helped her understand the financials, the legal options. When did it turn into elimination?" 3 weeks ago, Helena found out about the pregnancy, realized it would complicate everything. She said we needed a permanent solution." Moran looked up at Eddie with desperate eyes. "I told her I wouldn't be part of it. That's when she brought in Owen." Eddie's blood chilled. "Owen agreed to eliminate me?" "Owen agreed to help stage an accident. Make it look like an electrical mishap at your workshop. Helena said it would be quick, painless." Eddie gripped the back of a chair to keep from falling. His daughter's fiancé had agreed to eliminate him for money. "When?" Eddie asked. "Tonight, after the reception. When you go home to clean up, Owen's going to call you about a problem with the church's electrical system. When you go to fix it." Moran didn't need to finish. Eddie could picture the scene. Him alone in the church basement, working on a fabricated electrical problem, while Owen arranged a fatal accident. "What changed your mind?" Eddie asked. "Sarah." Moran's voice broke. "Yesterday she asked me to be her baby's godfather. She was so happy, so trusting. She called me Uncle Felix and said she wanted her child to know me as family." Eddie felt a surge of pity for the broken man in front of him. "Felix, you have to help me stop this." "How?" "If I go to the police, I'm admitting to conspiracy to commit elimination. I'll lose my medical license, go to prison. If you don't go to the police, I'll be dead by midnight." Moran buried his face in his hands. "There's something else you need to know." "What?" "Margaret's house. Helena found out your mother changed her will last month. Everything goes to a trust for Sarah's children now, not to you and Charlie." Eddie processed this information. "So eliminating me wouldn't give Helena access to the house?" "No, but Helena doesn't know that. Margaret told her the will was unchanged." Eddie's admiration for his mother grew. Margaret had been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. "Felix, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk upstairs and perform your role in Sarah's wedding. You're going to smile and dance and act like everything's normal. And then? And then, you're going to let Helena and Owen dig their own graves." The wedding ceremony began at 11 a.m. under threatening gray clouds. Eddie walked Sarah down the aisle for the second time in 2 days, but now every step felt like a countdown to disaster. Sarah looked beautiful in her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to accommodate her early pregnancy. She glowed with happiness, unaware that her groom was planning her father's elimination, and her doctor was the father of her unborn child. At the altar, Owen waited with a smile that looked carved from stone. Eddie placed Sarah's hand in Owen's and whispered, "Remember what I said about taking care of her?" Owen's grip tightened. "I remember." Eddie stepped back and caught Margaret's eye. She nodded slightly, confirming that recording devices were active and positioned throughout the church. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Sarah and Owen in holy matrimony." Eddie barely heard the words. He was watching Helena, who stood in the front row wearing a navy dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Every few minutes, she glanced at her phone, checking messages. Dr. Moran sat 3 rows back, sweating despite the cool morning air. Charlie fidgeted beside Eddie, clearly hungover but trying to look respectable. Bridge Collins stood beside Sarah as maid of honor, her eyes red from crying. She'd been Sarah's best friend since childhood, and Eddie wondered if she suspected the truth about Owen. "If anyone objects to this union," the minister said, "speak now or forever hold your peace." Eddie's heart pounded. This was his moment. He could stop the wedding, expose Owen's involvement in the elimination plot, save his daughter from marrying a man who'd agreed to eliminate her father. But then he saw Sarah's face, radiant, trusting, happy. Eddie stayed silent. "Owen," the minister continued, "do you take Sarah to be your wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" Owen's voice was steady. "I do." "Sarah, do you take Owen to be your husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" "I do." Sarah's voice rang clear and strong. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Owen, you may kiss your bride." The kiss seemed to last forever. The congregation erupted in applause. Helena wiped away tears that might have been genuine. Margaret watched everything with the intensity of a scientist observing a crucial experiment. Eddie clapped along with everyone else, playing his role as the proud father, while his heart broke into pieces. The reception was held in the church's fellowship hall, decorated with flowers and fairy lights that made everything look magical despite the storm clouds gathering outside. Eddie gave his father of the bride speech, toasting Sarah's happiness and Owen's promise to love and protect her. "To Sarah and Owen," he concluded, raising his glass, "may your love be as enduring as it is true." The crowd cheered. Owen smiled and nodded his thanks. Helena beamed with maternal pride. Eddie sat down, feeling like he'd just delivered his own eulogy. During dinner, Eddie watched the interactions between his family members and their co-conspirators. Helena and Dr. Moran maintained careful distance, but Eddie caught them exchanging meaningful glances. Owen seemed relaxed now, joking with the other guests and dancing with Sarah like a man without a care in the world. At 8 p.m., Eddie's phone buzzed with a text from Owen. "Electrical problem at the church. Pastor says the basement lights are sparking. Can you take a look after the reception?" Eddie showed the message to Margaret, who was sitting beside him. She read it and nodded grimly. "It's starting," she whispered. Eddie texted back, "Sure. Give me an hour to wrap up here." Owen responded immediately, "Thanks. I'll meet you there to show you the problem." Eddie pocketed his phone and looked around the reception hall. His daughter danced with her new husband. His wife chatted with other mothers, playing the role of proud parent. His family and friends celebrated love and new beginnings while planning his death. At 9 p.m., Eddie stood and approached the head table where Sarah and Owen sat with their wedding party. "Sarah, honey, I need to step out for a few minutes. Owen says there's an electrical problem at the church." Sarah frowned. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" "Pastor's worried about fire hazards. Won't take long." Sarah kissed Eddie's cheek. "Be careful, Daddy." Eddie's throat tightened. "I will, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too." Eddie turned to Owen. "Ready to show me this problem?" Owen stood and adjusted his tie. "Let's go." The church was dark except for a few security lights when Eddie and Owen arrived. Owen unlocked the main door with a key Eddie didn't know he had. "Pastor gave this to me earlier," Owen explained, as if reading Eddie's thoughts, "in case we needed access for cleanup tomorrow." They walked through the sanctuary, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. Eddie could smell lingering traces of Sarah's wedding flowers and the candles that had burned during the ceremony. "Problems downstairs," Owen said, leading Eddie toward the basement stairs. Eddie followed, his hand resting on the recording device in his pocket. Margaret had positioned backup recorders throughout the church, but Eddie wanted to make sure every word was captured clearly. The basement was darker than the sanctuary, lit only by a few overhead bulbs that cast harsh shadows on the walls. Owen led Eddie to a corner where electrical panels controlled the church's lighting system. "See these sparks?" Owen pointed to a panel that looked perfectly normal to Eddie's experienced eye. "I don't see any sparks, Owen." Owen's demeanor shifted subtly. The friendly son-in-law mask slipped, revealing something colder underneath. "Look closer," Owen said. Eddie approached the panel, knowing this was the moment Owen would make his move. He pretended to examine the wiring while tensing his muscles for whatever was coming. Owen, this electrical system is fine. There's no problem here. Actually, Eddie, there is a problem. A big one. Eddie turned around. Owen stood between him and the stairs, holding a heavy wrench that had been sitting on a nearby workbench. The problem, Owen continued, is that you know too much. Eddie kept his voice steady. About what? About Helena, about the money, about our plans? Our plans? Owen smiled, and Eddie saw the calculated predator that had been hiding behind the charming exterior. You really thought I loved Sarah? That I wanted to marry a working-class girl with no prospects? Eddie felt rage building in his chest. Sarah's a wonderful young woman. Sarah's a means to an end, just like Helena, just like you. What end is that, Owen? Financial security. Your wife has access to family money through Margaret's will. Your life insurance policy is worth $500,000. Add it all up and we're looking at over $1.5 million. Eddie pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Owen raised the wrench. I don't think so. Owen, think about what you're doing. This is elimination. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison, only if I get caught. And who's going to catch me? You'll be dead from an electrical accident. Helena will be devastated widow. I'll be the grieving son-in-law who tried to save you but arrived too late. Eddie backed toward the far wall, buying time. What about Sarah? She loves you. Sarah will get over it. Rich widows always do. She's pregnant. Owen's expression darkened. Yeah, I heard about that. Funny thing is, we haven't been intimate in months. So either Sarah's lying about the timing or she's been cheating on me. Eddie's mind raced. Owen didn't know about Dr. Moran being the father. That information could be leverage. What if the baby isn't yours? Eddie asked. Then I'll deal with that problem after I deal with you. Owen moved closer, the wrench raised above his head. Eddie prepared to fight for his life. Then the basement lights went out. In the darkness, Eddie heard Owen curse and stumble. Eddie used the sound to orient himself and moved away from where Owen thought he was. Eddie, where are you? Owen's voice carried a note of panic. Eddie stayed silent, using his knowledge of the basement layout to navigate in the dark. He'd been in this church dozens of times for Sarah's Sunday school programs and community events. The emergency lighting kicked in, casting a dim red glow throughout the basement. Eddie could see Owen near the electrical panel, wrench in hand, looking around frantically. This doesn't change anything, Eddie. You're still going to die tonight. Eddie's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from Helena. Is it done? Owen apparently received the same message because he pulled out his own phone and typed a response. What are you telling my wife? Eddie asked. Owen looked up from his phone. That her husband had a tragic accident while trying to help at the church. Very sad, very believable. Except I'm not dead. Yet. Owen lunged forward with the wrench. Eddie dodged and grabbed a folding chair, using it to block Owen's swing. The wrench connected with the metal chair, sending vibrations up both men's arms. They circled each other in the dim red light, two men fighting for their lives in a church basement. You know what's funny? Owen said, breathing hard. Sarah actually thinks you're a good father. She talks about you constantly. How you fixed her bicycle when she was 6. How you taught her to drive. How you walked her down the aisle today. Eddie felt tears burning his eyes. She's a good daughter. She's naive, just like you. Neither of you saw this coming. Owen swung the wrench again. Eddie caught his wrist and they grappled, stumbling between the folding chairs and church supplies stored in the basement. Eddie was 20 years older than Owen, but he was stronger from decades of physical labor. He managed to twist the wrench out of Owen's grip and throw it across the room. Owen pulled a knife from his jacket pocket. You came prepared, Eddie gasped. I always come prepared. Owen slashed at Eddie, who jumped back and felt the blade slice through his suit jacket. They were both breathing hard now, sweat mixing with the dust and fear in the basement air. Why? Eddie asked. Why do all this? You could have just married Sarah and been part of the family. Because being part of your family isn't enough. I need to own it, control it. Helena understands that. Helena's using you, Owen. After I'm dead, what makes you think she'll still need you? Owen's smile faltered slightly. She loves me. Helena loves money. You're just her latest tool for getting it. Eddie could see doubt creeping into Owen's expression. Good. Doubt made people careless. Even if that's true, Owen said, it doesn't change anything. You still have to die. Owen lunged with the knife. Eddie grabbed another folding chair and swung it like a bat, connecting with Owen's ribs. Owen doubled over, gasping. Eddie didn't wait. He ran for the stairs. Behind him, he heard Owen recovering, cursing, chasing after him. Eddie made it to the sanctuary before Owen caught up. They faced each other between the pews where Sarah had been married 6 hours earlier. You can't run forever, Eddie. I don't need to run forever. I just need to run long enough. Eddie's phone rang. The caller ID showed Margaret's number. Answer it, Owen said, pointing the knife at Eddie. Tell her everything's fine. Eddie answered the call. Mom? Eddie, where are you? Helena's looking for you at the reception. I'm at the church with Owen. Having some technical difficulties. Margaret's voice sharpened. What kind of difficulties? Eddie looked at Owen, who was listening to every word. The kind that require police attention. I'm calling Will. Good idea. Eddie hung up. Owen's face had gone pale. How much did she hear? Enough. Owen ran toward the church's front door. Eddie followed, not wanting to let him escape and potentially hurt Sarah or other family members. Outside, rain was falling steadily. Owen's car was parked next to Eddie's truck. Owen reached his car first and tried to start it, but the engine wouldn't turn over. Eddie smiled grimly. Margaret had been thorough in her preparations. Owen got out of the car and faced Eddie in the rain. You think you've won? I think you've lost. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Owen still held the knife, but his hand was shaking. Helena will never forgive you for this. Helena will never forgive herself for choosing you. The first police car pulled into the church parking lot, followed immediately by 2 more. Detective Will Travers got out of the lead car, his weapon drawn. Owen Fletcher, drop the knife and put your hands where I can see them. Owen looked around wildly, realizing he was surrounded. The knife fell from his fingers and clattered on the wet pavement. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elimination and attempted elimination, Will said, approaching carefully. As Owen was handcuffed and placed in the police car, he looked at Eddie one last time. This isn't over. Helena won't let it be over. Eddie wiped rain from his face and walked toward Will. We need to get to the reception. Helena doesn't know what's happened yet. What about Dr. Moran? He's probably at the reception too, playing his role. Will nodded. Let's go collect your wife and her boyfriend. The reception was still in full swing when Eddie and Detective Travers arrived. Sarah danced with Charlie while Helena chatted with other parents at a corner table. Dr. Moran stood near the bar, nursing a drink and checking his phone repeatedly. Eddie scanned the room, looking for the best way to handle the situation without traumatizing Sarah more than necessary. Where's Owen? Helena asked, approaching Eddie with a bright smile. I haven't seen him in over an hour. Owen's been arrested, Eddie said quietly. Helena's smile froze. What? For conspiracy to commit elimination. My elimination, specifically. Helena looked around frantically as if searching for an escape route. Eddie, I don't know what you're talking about. I have recordings, Helena, photographs, bank records, text messages. I know about you and Felix. I know about the insurance policies. I know about the plan to eliminate me. Helena's face cycled through several emotions. Shock, denial, anger, and finally, resignation. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough, Doctor. Moran appeared beside them, his face ashen. Helena, we need to leave. Now. Too late for that, Felix, Will said, showing his badge. You're both under arrest. For what? Helena demanded. Conspiracy to commit elimination, fraud, insurance fraud. Adultery isn't illegal, but the rest of it will put you away for 20 years. The conversation was drawing attention from other reception guests. Sarah stopped dancing and walked over, her wedding dress rustling. Daddy, what's happening? Where's Owen? Eddie's heart broke as he looked at his daughter's confused, frightened face. Sarah, honey, we need to talk. Where's my husband? Eddie glanced at Will, who nodded grimly. Owen's been arrested, sweetheart. Arrested? For what? Eddie took Sarah's hands in his. They were cold and trembling. For planning to hurt me, for lying to you about who he really is. Sarah stared at her father, then at her mother, then at Dr. Moran. The pieces were starting to come together in her mind, and Eddie could see the moment she understood. The baby, she whispered. Owen said the timing was wrong. Dr. Moran stepped forward. Sarah, I can explain. You're the father. Sarah's voice was barely audible. You're the father of my baby. The reception hall had gone completely quiet. Every guest, every family member, every friend was watching the Halloran family implode in real time. Sarah looked at her mother. How long, Sarah, please, how long have you been sleeping with Dr. Moran while planning to eliminate my father? Helena couldn't answer. She just stood there in her navy dress, exposed and defeated. Sarah turned to Eddie. Did you know? When you walked me down the aisle, did you know Owen was going to try to eliminate you? Eddie nodded. I suspected. Why didn't you stop the wedding? Eddie's voice cracked. Because I wanted you to have one perfect day. One day where you felt loved and safe and happy. Sarah started crying then, deep sobs that shook her entire body. Bridge Collins rushed over and put her arms around her best friend. Get her out of here, Eddie told Bridge. Take her somewhere safe. As Bridge led Sarah away, Helena made one last desperate play. Eddie, please, we can work this out. As a family. Eddie looked at his wife of 27 years. The woman who'd borne his daughter, shared his bed, planned his death. We're not a family anymore, Helena. We're just strangers who used to live in the same house. Will handcuffed Helena and Dr. Moran. As they were led away, Margaret appeared at Eddie's side. It's over, she said quietly. Eddie watched his wife disappear into the police car, then looked around the empty reception hall. Flowers still decorated the tables. Sarah's wedding cake sat untouched. The DJ played music to an empty dance floor. No, Eddie said, it's just beginning. 3 months later, Eddie sat in the courthouse hallway, waiting for the final sentencing hearing. Helena had pled guilty to conspiracy and fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. Dr. Moran was facing medical license revocation and 5 years in prison. Owen had received 15 years for attempted elimination and conspiracy. Sarah sat beside Eddie, her pregnancy now visible beneath her black dress. She'd moved back home after Owen's arrest, filing for annulment and trying to rebuild her life. Are you sure you want to be here for this? Eddie asked. Sarah nodded. I need to hear her say it. I need to understand why. The courtroom doors opened and they were called inside. Helena sat at the defendant's table, looking older and smaller than Eddie remembered. She'd lost weight in jail, and her hair had gone gray at the roots. The judge read the charges and sentences methodically. Helena would serve 8 years for conspiracy to commit elimination and insurance fraud. Dr. Moran received 6 years and permanent loss of his medical license. Owen's sentence stood at 15 years with possibility of parole in 10. Mrs. Halloran, the judge said, do you have anything to say before sentencing is finalized? Helena stood slowly and turned toward Eddie and Sarah. I want to say that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I lost sight of what was important. She looked directly at Sarah. I thought money would solve our problems. I thought starting over with someone new would make me happy. I was wrong about everything except one thing. What's that? Sarah asked. I was wrong to think I could improve on the family I already had. Helena sat down. The judge banged his gavel. Sentencing is complete. Court dismissed. As Helena was led away in handcuffs, she looked back at Eddie one last time. He saw regret in her eyes, but also something else. Relief, maybe, or exhaustion. Outside the courthouse, Eddie and Sarah stood in the afternoon sunlight. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now we figure out how to be a family without her. Sarah placed her hand on her growing belly. What about the baby? Eddie looked at his daughter, seeing Helena's beauty and his own determination in her face. The baby will be loved. That's all that matters. They walked to Eddie's truck together. As they drove home, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Daddy? Yeah? Do you think she ever really loved us? Eddie considered the question carefully. I think she loved us as much as she was capable of loving anyone. It just wasn't enough. Sarah nodded and stared out the window at the passing landscape. I hope I'm better at it than she was. You will be. That evening, Eddie sat on his porch watching the sunset. Margaret joined him with 2 cups of coffee. Any regrets? She asked. Eddie thought about Helena in her jail cell, Owen in his, Dr. Moran facing the ruin of his career. He thought about Sarah trying to rebuild her life as a single mother. He thought about the 27 years of marriage that had ended in betrayal and conspiracy. About stopping them? No. About Helena? Eddie sipped his coffee and watched the sun disappear behind the trees. I regret that she felt like she had to choose between loving us and having what she wanted. I regret that we weren't enough for her. Margaret patted his shoulder. Some people aren't built for contentment, Eddie. They're always looking for something better, something more. Helena was one of those people. What about me? What am I built for? Margaret smiled. You're built for fixing things, and right now, Sarah needs fixing more than any appliance you've ever worked on. Eddie nodded. Inside the house, he could hear Sarah moving around the kitchen, preparing dinner for the three of them. The sound was comforting, normal, hopeful. Think she'll be okay? She's a Halloran, Margaret said. We're tougher than we look. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah appeared in the doorway. Dinner's ready. Eddie stood and followed his mother and daughter inside. The kitchen table was set for 3, not 4. Sarah had made pot roast, Eddie's favorite. They sat down together and said grace, thanking God for family, for survival, for second chances. After dinner, Eddie helped Sarah with the dishes while Margaret watched the news. Daddy, Sarah said quietly, there's something I need to tell you. Eddie's stomach tightened. What is it? I've been thinking about the baby, about what to name it. Oh. If it's a girl, I want to name her Margaret. After Grandma. Eddie smiled. She'd like that. And if it's a boy. Sarah paused, looking nervous. I want to name him Edward, after you. Eddie felt tears burning his eyes. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You saved us, Daddy. You saved me from marrying someone who would have destroyed our family. You saved yourself from people who wanted to eliminate you. You saved all of us. Eddie hugged his daughter, feeling her growing belly pressed against him. Inside, his grandchild moved and kicked, already fighting for space in the world. We saved each other, he said. Outside, night fell over Martha's vineyard. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm against the shore. In houses across the island, families gathered for dinner, shared their days, made plans for tomorrow. In one of those houses, 3 generations of Hallorans sat together in the living room. Margaret knitted baby clothes. Sarah read pregnancy books. Eddie repaired a broken lamp that had been sitting in the closet for months. They were learning how to be a family again. It was different now, smaller and more careful, but it was real in a way it hadn't been for years. At 10 o'clock, Sarah kissed Eddie goodnight and went upstairs to her old bedroom. Margaret followed soon after, leaving Eddie alone with his thoughts and his repairs. He finished fixing the lamp and plugged it in. Light filled the corner of the room that had been dark for months. Eddie smiled and unplugged it again. He'd fixed another broken thing. Tomorrow, he'd fix something else. The day after that, something else again. It's what he did. It's who he was. Eddie Halloran, the fixer, the protector, the man who'd saved his family from the people who claimed to love them. He turned off the living room lights and headed upstairs. In her bedroom, Sarah was already asleep, one hand resting on her belly. In the master bedroom that used to belong to Eddie and Helena, Margaret snored softly. Eddie went to his own room, the guest room that had become his sanctuary, and lay down on the narrow bed. Through the window, he could see the lighthouse in the distance, its beam sweeping across the dark water in regular intervals, warning ships away from dangerous shores, guiding them home to safety, just like he'd done for his family. Eddie closed his eyes and slept dreamlessly for the first time in months.